Actually, the George Floyd's death, it was a triggering for us, I mean, for Afghan people, because it remembered the killing of Farhonda, who was beaten and burned by public in the main city of Kabul, in the capital of Afghanistan. And listening to news, we tried to find the video and watch several times, and it was distressing and horrible to deal with. I think for this George Floyd, uh, the Black Lives Matter campaign started, and then, especially in Afghanistan, people have added Afghan Lives Matter, or let's say bring it down to Hazara Lives Matter, and we had a lot of social campaign on that.
So when we look at this situation, there was a little bit of hypocrisy in it too, because India as a whole, they were very sad. They acknowledged the fact that George Floyd, the incident of George Floyd was unfair, and it was, a part of racism, and he was discriminated. But at the same time, India is also a place where there's a lot of prejudice, biases, and racism against a lot of people from the northeast of India, which they sometimes mostly do not acknowledge that. So hence there was a little bit of hypocrisy in that. But how this incident played in my community was very deep, and it really affected us, and it really made us reflect of these things that can happen in the world. It can happen to us and anywhere else. And we racism is a common threat, and we really need to take actions forward on how do we go about entirely abolishing racism from the world.
The issues in Bangladesh are more about ethnic discrimination than really racial divides or things of that sort. But even still, the main things that the issue really showed us was the fact that it was a very graphic representation of human beings being extremely violent towards each other, and how prejudices can really take us from our comfort zones, and it can put us in situations where there is real harm being posed to another person. George Floyd lost his life simply because he was a Black person in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the idea that something like that could happen to another person, especially coming from people who are supposed to protect our community, especially from police officers, was, again, a really graphic representation of what the world is really like, unfortunately.
So I'm basically based in New York, but the moment when this whole Black Lives Matter movement started in US, we knew that racial discrimination existed in US, but it was the first time that the movement Black Lives Matter became so big, and it was all over the social media. And within Afghanistan, there were very positive responses as well, because right when the Black Lives Matters movement started in Afghanistan, at the same time, a lot of our Afghan migrants, when they were going to Iran to cross the border, they were brutally tortured by the Iranian guards. And this is the racial discrimination that existed between Iran and Afghanistan from a long time ago. But since the Black Lives Matters movement started in the US, it really inspired Afghans as well to start their own movement as well, which was called #Afghan Life Matters. So this was a very positive response for the first time that the Afghan civil society started. And also they also started a new hashtag, which was like, I can't breathe and I also need water. Because back the incident that happened in Iran, two of our Afghan immigrants, they were burning alive in a car accident, and nobody was giving them water anymore, although there were a lot of Iranian guards that were in that place, but nobody was helping them anymore because of the racial discrimination that exists between Iran and Afghanistan. So when this whole Black Lives Matters started in US, it sparked a very outreach in Afghanistan as well. And this is one of the positive responses from the Afghan community, started, and this was a very positive reaction toward this whole movement in Afghanistan. So ethnic and racial discrimination is a very long-lasting issue in Afghanistan, and throughout the history there was like different conflict between different ethnic tribes in Afghanistan, and this is one of the issues that there is instability in Afghanistan. But at the same time, we have racial discrimination and ethnic issue with our neighboring countries as well, especially with Pakistan and especially with Iran, because a lot of discrimination exists within the border with these two countries. For example, just like I said before, that a lot of our immigrants who goes to Pakistan and who also goes to Iran, they face a lot of racial discrimination that just because they are Afghan. And there are a lot of police and police brutality exists within the border as well towards Afghan citizens. But at the same time, we have ethnic and racial conflict in Afghanistan as well between different ethnic and tribal groups in Afghanistan.
I think discrimination in Afghanistan is one of the major challenges of the social life that we are dealing with, and a source of violence and a key factor behind the continuation of violence. I think we need the effort to make achieve a safe and non-discriminatory society in order to eliminate this discrimination.
Like there are so many scenarios and situations I can talk about when I say that there are different kind of ethnic violations that takes place in India, especially for the northeastern people, because we look very different. We look more, we have more Mongolian features than we have that of the normal, I mean, the rest of India. I mean, how the world perceive India is that of Rajasthan, Delhi, Bombay, and Bollywood, but they don't know that there is another part of India that looks very different. Secondly, I work on anti-human trafficking. So what I have seen is that a lot of girls from the Northeast gets trafficked because of their looks. There is this entire, there is this entire notion that Northeastern women are very fragile, they're very dainty and submissive. Hence, they get, more trafficked to the rest of the country and also to the other parts of the world, because they have these very stark Asian looking features. So this is one of the ethnic violation that we see. And when Northeastern people go and live in other cities in India, they face a lot of discrimination because of how they look. There would be landlords who would not give them house to live in because they have this preconceived idea about the Northeastern being wild, because we're tribal. So they think we're wild people, we're head hunters, we eat people and we eat dogs. And there are so many preconceived notions about us in the rest of India. So this is one of the ethnic discrimination we see happening for a lot of Northeastern people in India.
Bangladesh in general has, aside from the ethnic majority, we essentially have two different groups of ethnic minorities. The larger the larger population is in the hilly areas near Chittagong and the Chittagong Hill Tracts districts, and the other group is those living in the flatlands near Mymensingh. So the discrimination against these groups is mostly more targeted, like historically has been mostly more targeted towards those in the Chittagong Hill Tracts areas. And there is a history of this discrimination. There is a history of even violence against these ethnic minorities. That is basically because of that relocation, because of that historic discrimination that was at that time, and because of the sort of inbuilt belief that exists even now. These people are somehow less human. These people are somehow not part of us or different, and which is why it's sort of somehow justified to discriminate against them. The ideologies still persist, and the ideologies are the problems that we are facing even now.
Nazila, I just wanted to add something to what Arvin had to say. So I come from the state called Meghalaya in the northeast of India, and Meghalaya is closely situated to Bangladesh. So the ethnic tribe he's talking about are the tribe, the people of my community who live on the other part of India. And so they are also, I'm a Khasi, and so these people are also Khasis. And before independent, I mean pre-independence, there was no India and everybody lived differently. So as soon as independence happened of India, so there was a demarcation of borders. So a lot of people of my community started living in what was before called East Pakistan, now called Bangladesh. So they live there, and these are the people of my community who actually go through a lot of discrimination, especially at the hands of the paramilitary forces like the border guards of Bangladesh. A lot of women go through a lot of rapes and different kinds of sexual exploitations because of what Arvind said, the community they come from. They think we're savages.
We should support each other. I mean, we should support youth in order to fight this discrimination. I think many organizations do fantastic job on this, but still we need to work. For example, the organizations that I'm involved with is what we do is time to time we have workshops, we have seminars for youth citizens in order to raise their awareness, and especially when something happens, that we stand with the people, and then we have conferences, press conferences, and we release statements in order to support people.
Afghanistan has more than 60% of our population are young, and they can play a very crucial role in this regard. Our organization, we recently launched a program called the Peacebuilders Club, where we have members from 34 provinces of Afghanistan from different ethnic background and culture. And with what we do in Peacebuilders Club is that we have 4 programs that addresses all of the issue related to discrimination, ethnic discrimination, women empowerment, and all the problems that we have in Afghanistan. We usually try to address those problems. One of the programs that we have within the Peace Builder Club is the Peace Building Dialogues. We actually do conduct youth peace building dialogue in different provinces. For example, in Nangarhar province, we conduct peace building dialogue with religious leaders, ethnic leaders, and tribal leaders in that province from different communities. We gather them together, and at the same time, we talk about different issues, whether it's related to youth participation in the current Afghan peace process, women participation in the current Afghan peace process. And one of the issues that we tackle and we put pressure more on it is how we can involve young women peace builders in these youth community peace building dialogues in different provinces, because we want to amplify their voices and different matters. And the other program that we have in this Peace Builder Club is called peer mentorship. What we do is we actually target government high schools in Afghanistan, and specifically girls high school in Afghanistan. And we have a program called Peace Boost to School. So what we do, we actually try to train young students from grade 11, 12, and 9. And what we do is that we teach them about culture awareness, culture understanding, how many tribes exist in Afghanistan, what type of discrimination there are in Afghanistan. And we also motivate them and provide them training about their career choices. Because why we target these young peace builders from high school? Because we want to build leaders from a very young age.
I think as youth, as the next generation, and for generations that come after us, I think the most important thing is that it is up to us, not just as individuals, but as a community as a whole, to unlearn the prejudices that were taught to us that are still propagated systematically. Because, and just to give you an example to put this into perspective, I have a friend named Oshim who is from the Chakma minority in our country. And One day, while going back to his hostel at night, while he was walking outside of the hostel gate, two children, and emphasis on children because these kids were not much older than 8, maybe 8 to 10 from what he said. So these two kids, they run up to him, this person who is walking alone on the street, minding his own business, and out of nowhere, they point at him and they go, basically, the exact Bangla is Huidak Chingchong, which is a very common trope, and sadly a common trope that still persists. And mind you, my friend, he wasn't doing anything to them. He was minding his own business. He was going up to his hostel room. And these kids, out of nowhere, they felt, not only did they feel that it was an okay thing to do, but the fact that these are such young kids means that the problem exists unto that level. The fact that, and again, children don't learn to hate. Children are not born with the idea of hate, with the idea of discrimination. Hate is taught. And for kids this young, knowing this specific bit of discrimination and the fact that it wasn't just a one-off thing. They knew exactly who they were saying it to. They knew exactly what they were saying. Maybe they didn't know the history of discrimination behind it. Maybe they didn't know the weight of what they were saying, but they saw it as something that they could say. Probably because their parents do, probably because their aunts and uncles do, probably because the older figures in their life do, because they had to have learned it from somewhere. And that, I feel, is the single biggest issue to tackle for us as the youth. It is up to us to unlearn it from ourselves, and it is up to us to teach our children and our grandchildren and the generations after us not to learn these things, to respect people as being human.
Firstly, young people should really focus on working towards this from the place of empathy. They really need to understand how, why, when, and focus on not hating your perpetrator, but understanding the place they're coming from, and work, and create a space where everybody can actually work together. We need to have a much more positive outlook. Then we should not be like what our past generations have been, where we're so involved in criticizing what the government has not done, what the young people are not doing, what the community is not doing. But we as a young person, I feel we should really focus on what we can do together to make it better.
Especially in Afghanistan, we face a lot of challenges, and because when you do these kind of jobs, especially when it is voluntary and you do volunteerism, I think sometimes most of the people resist. They say that I mean, change is not easy, especially in Afghanistan, to make. People resist, and people blame us for doing this. People blame youth for doing this. And most of the time, people say that they have projects from the West, and they implement for money. I think this is the challenge that most of the time we face. And whenever we do something, whenever we innovate or we bring a project which is very successful in other countries, when we bring in Afghanistan, and then people stand against it, and then they say that it's most of the time they say that it's against our culture.
But one of the issues that we face is the lack of funding from the government and international community. And in order to do this, and in order to conduct these programs, we also need security and political will. And that is one of the struggles that a lot of youth leaders face in Afghanistan, just like Abdul Ghafar says, the culture of volunteerism is not very strong in Afghanistan. A lot of youth, if you tell them, okay, this is activity is pure volunteer based, you will not receive any money or we cannot give you anything. So they actually back out, they don't help you. And this is one of the things that we actually want to tackle, is to encourage youth to do volunteer activities, because a lot of Afghanistan is a poor community and we might not have funding for different projects. And we need to have like a very strong volunteer program to involve youth peace builder from different tribes, from different ethnic groups, to solve these problems.
And we really need to also look at making consistent noise. For example, the George Floyd incident happened and everybody, in the whole world, they just went crazy. They started talking about Black Lives Matter. There was a whole different conversation about racism, but the fact is that racism was happening even before George Floyd's death. So you see, and then now the entire noise is actually coming down again. So we have to wait for another death to happen for actually people to talk about racism. So we should not do something like that. We should make consistent noise. We have technology in our hand as our powerful tool. We should use that to actually create conversations in our everyday lives, have conversations with our friends and family about racism and ethnic violations. We can do these small things to actually build a better place to live for everyone in this world.
We need to talk about these things. As Emarine said, the voices are dying down again. We shouldn't have to need another death, another George Floyd, another Breonna Taylor in order to bring up this conversation again. And not just in the US. The US is out and about in protest of this. But in light of this, we, as the international community, need to realize what's happening, not like the fact that it exists in every country, the fact that someone somewhere always is going to need help, not only to survive these situations, but also to help fight them.
I'm speaking as a civil society representative here, is that a lot of grassroots civil society organization that works in Afghanistan to tackle these problems, they should be funded. And there is a need for political support as well from not only international community, but also from the local community and from the government as well. For example, right now, the other problem that I just said, like there is a huge digital divide between women that not accessing, not having access to technology and everything. So how can we know that we are hearing their voices, we are hearing their concern? This is something that international community can help us with.
I think as an international community, firstly, this itself is a very good platform for all of us to come together and talk about it. And we should have more such platforms like this and have more young people coming in and talking about their perspective, about what they think about racial discrimination or ethnic violation as a whole. Secondly, I feel like there should be a lot more exchange programs. Usually we have seen that there are more cultural exchange programs happening, but then I think it will be one of a kind when there will be a cultural program where people are coming to talk about racism. We can have a lot of international community coming to the northeast of India and seeing it themselves of how northeast of India is and how beautifully different it is from the rest of India, and